Hello. Terve. I don't know. Is there anyone from Finland here? No one from Finland. Sweden? Denmark? Iceland? Sweden? Hey, nice. We still speak Swedish, though. That's okay. Anyone from Norway? Okay. No one. Norway. Oh, nice. So I have some people from the Nordics. Ask them. They'll tell you why you should move over to the Nordics and not stay here. Uh, I'm going to be giving a talk about continuous documentation. This is a talk I gave at Belfast, and if you're wondering where Belfast is, it's not in the US, actually. It's in the UK, it's in Northern Ireland. It's a full conference talk, right? So I'm going to try to take the key takeaways from that talk I gave at the conference. So what I'm going to do, basically, is I'm going to bullshit for 3 minutes and then talk for like 4 minutes. So yeah, let's give it a go. So that's my name, Kenny Bulamaya Steven. You can call me Steven. I'm the front-end engineering lead at Bcaster. If you're wondering how a back-end lead actually becomes a front-end lead, we can talk about that later. I'm also the Conveyor community manager for CoderFreak. CoderFreak is a free weekend intensive software engineering bootcamp where we try to give underrepresented folks a way into tech to get into the industry. You can find me on Twitter at ExpensiveStevie. Also, if you want to ask, this is one of those things that got stopped from high school, so I don't have a choice now. I can't change it. So I work at Bcaster. What we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about what continuous documentation is. I'm going to talk about why it's important, and I'm going to point out common pitfalls in current documentation practices. And by the way, I'm trying to hide my accent, but if you get it and you want to talk about Brexit, I live in Finland, so I don't really care anymore, just so you know. So what is continuous documentation? Continuous documentation is a documentation pattern we actually developed at Bcaster. And what it means is that you take into consideration constant changes and improvement in your code, and then also your business logic. And this is actually reflected internally for every sprint that you have. So in our industry, changes, they occur very fast. Sometimes it's difficult to catch all of it. You can have like change logs, but how many people actually, just random show, how many people actually go through change logs here? Exactly. So you see how few that is. This is why it's not really the best idea to actually use for your documentation. It's the same case, like everywhere. Release notes, change logs, these are not really the best way. We actually have something I believe all open source communities use, the request for comments. You can go through these also, you can see the background to every single case, right? But they're not so detailed in that sense. Like there's the discussions, but there's also the implementation that you actually need to look out for. So why is it important to have continuous documentation? The reason behind a change that you fail to document today might become lost forever. So resulting, it gives you a knowledge gap, right? We don't take a lot of things into consideration, and ideally we should. So what you end up having is you have an unsynchronized knowledge base. You have really shitty documentation, which a lot of the community, open source community has. I really hope we actually can fix that. Yeah, like I said, I'm now a front-end engineering lead. Right, team, go. Common pitfalls in current documentation practices. If you just said to yourself that we're definitely doing it right, then I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, you're doing it wrongly, actually. I'm going to show you why. That's exactly how it goes. You get to that point and you're just about to hit it, and then you miss it. And I'm going to show you probably some things you're actually doing wrong. I'm pretty sure you're going to resonate with this, so let's go. First of all, READMEs. You put majority of your code documentation in READMEs. Who doesn't write READMEs here? Raise your hands. Who writes almost all the documentation in READMEs? Come on, be honest. Okay, that's true. Now, it seems to be a very good idea, but this is actually a very bad idea. You shouldn't have your entire documentation in READMEs. Your READMEs are supposed to be very lightweight. They should basically just have information regarding setting up. Every other thing should be just a section. And a lot of people don't know, but you can actually have a docs folder and link to every single documentation that you need to have. So you don't necessarily need to have a huge README. Actually, I can tell you personally, I teach a lot of beginners, and if they go to a repo and then the README goes like, you need to scroll down for more than 2 minutes, they're already discouraged. So try not to put your documentation in READMEs. Unhelpful phrasing. How many people use a word checker for the documentation? Okay, that's 2 or 3 hands. And this is something that we actually do not take seriously enough in the industry. It's actually very important. There are a lot of unhelpful phrases that we have in documentation, and it's actually in the Go community. I can pull up some repos, but I will try not to do that, so some people don't feel bad. But we should actually take this into consideration also. And lastly, inconsiderate writing. Can you take your documentation and give to a non-technical person and expect them to make sense of it? The answer to this question is usually no. And usually when you have beginners, this is where the challenge comes. So we need to actually take that into consideration also. So let's start with README. READMEs are supposed to be an entry point to your documentation as opposed to being your main documentation. If you're having more than 3 sections in a README, that already signifies there's a lot of information that needs to be somewhere else. And lastly, if you ever know what clutter is, that's exactly what extensive README are. You just have clutter. You don't really have a documentation. And that's too slow. But yeah, come on. At least you tried, right? You tried to write something. But let's just take it to the next level and make it a bit better. So unhelpful phrasing. Simply run the test. You see this in a lot of Go repos. This is absolute BS, really. Because right now you're just assuming. This is really unhelpful phrasing. You shouldn't have that on your documentation. Just write the compiler and then it simply works. We have that also. Ideally, we shouldn't have this. So I have 1 minute. I'm going to rush through this. Simply, just simple, actually, easily, obviously. Don't do that BS. Come on, it doesn't help anybody. Let's try to have like proper phrasing. Inconsiderate writing, gender favoring. Hey guys, he, his, dude. We have this in Slack. We have this in the documentation. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't assume people's pronouns. That's actually wrong. Avoid race-related phrases. Actually, I saw one. We had one pull request that said, "Make Ember great again." Right? It was written by a Danish guy. We don't really know the connotations regarding that stuff. And then the Americans on the Ember team were like, "Nah, you got to take that thing down. We don't want to have that." So you have to be careful about the cultural and race-related issues. And polarizing. It has always been like that. Don't use that in your documentation. And that's all for today. Thank you.